It was my husband's birthday, and he wanted to keep things simple, just a casual evening with a handful of his closest friends. I spent the day preparing appetizers and setting up our living room to create a warm, relaxed atmosphere. By the time our friends arrived, the house was quickly filled with laughter and lively conversation. It was one of those gatherings where everyone felt completely at home. The night was shaping up beautifully. I moved around the room, refilling drinks, bringing out snacks, and making sure everyone was comfortable. My husband was deep in conversation with his friend Mark, while Greg, his best friend since college, entertained the group with hilarious stories from their younger days. Greg had always been the life of the party. His quick wit and humor made him easy to get along with. Over the years, he had become like family to us, which made what happened next even more shocking. As the evening progressed, I noticed we were out of wine. I decided to grab another bottle from the wine cellar, which was tucked away in a small storage room just off the living room. Quietly, I excused myself and headed there, kneeling down to reach the bottom shelf where my husband kept his special reserve bottles. I carefully selected one. Just as my fingers closed around the neck of the bottle, I heard footsteps behind me. I assumed it was my husband coming to help, so I didn't think twice about it. But out of nowhere, I felt a sharp, playful slap on my backside. Startled, I immediately stood up, expecting to see my husband's amused face. Instead, I was greeted by Greg's mischievous grin. His eyes sparkled with a bold playfulness, and he even gave me a wink, as if we were sharing some kind of private joke. For a moment, I was utterly speechless. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. This was Greg, someone we trusted, someone who had been a part of our lives for years. His slap had been so unexpected and casual that I briefly questioned if I had somehow misinterpreted it. But the cheeky smile on his face told me otherwise. I tried to brush it off, forcing a small, awkward laugh, hoping to diffuse the tension. Greg seemed to take that as a signal that I wasn't upset. He chuckled, saying, "Don't look so shocked. It's all in good fun," before strolling back to the group as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment, still processing what had occurred. When I finally returned to the living room with the wine bottle, my thoughts were racing. I told myself it was just a harmless joke, maybe fueled by Greg drinking a bit more than usual. Still, I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling it left behind. As I handed out drinks and joined in the laughter, I became hyper-aware of Greg's presence. I noticed every time his eyes lingered on me for just a bit too long, or when he made an offhand comment that seemed strangely flirtatious. My husband, deeply engrossed in the festivities, hadn't noticed a thing. I grew increasingly anxious as the night wore on. I was caught in a dilemma. Should I address what had happened, potentially creating tension at my husband's birthday party, or stay silent to keep the peace? My husband had always valued his friendship with Greg, and I didn't want to cause conflict. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that lingered. Finally, I decided I needed to tell my husband. I waited for a moment when the party was in full swing and quietly pulled him into the kitchen, away from the noise and laughter. Something happened, I began, carefully choosing my words. "I need to tell you about Greg." His initial reaction was disbelief. He stared at me for a moment, his brow furrowed, as if trying to process what I was saying. Then his expression shifted to a mix of surprise and concern. "Are you sure it wasn't just a joke?" he asked cautiously, clearly struggling to make sense of it. I nodded firmly. "It didn't feel like a joke," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't think he meant any harm, but it was completely unexpected." My husband ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. I could see him wrestling with his thoughts, caught between loyalty to his friend and the instinct to protect me. After a moment, he gave me a reassuring nod and promised to keep an eye on Greg for the rest of the night. When we rejoined the group, I noticed a subtle but definite shift in my husband's demeanor. He didn't confront Greg directly, but he stayed close to me, keeping his arm around my waist or his hand on my shoulder. This quiet, protective stance created an underlying tension that even Greg couldn't ignore. I caught Greg glancing at my husband several times, his once confident expression faltering as if he sensed a shift in the air. The rest of the evening passed in a strange, tense haze. Greg became noticeably quieter. Although he tried to joke and keep up his usual cheerful demeanor, there was an unmistakable hesitance in his manner. I felt torn between relief and discomfort, struggling to reconcile the Greg I had always known, a playful and friendly presence in our lives, with the man who had crossed the line earlier in the evening. As the party wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Greg approached me. His face was a mixture of embarrassment and contrition. He mumbled a quick apology, saying he hadn't meant to make me uncomfortable. I could see the genuine regret in his eyes. While it didn't erase what had happened, his apology offered a small sense of closure. After everyone left, my husband and I sat together in the now quiet living room, reflecting on the events of the night. He assured me that he would address the situation with Greg in a way that preserved their friendship, while making it clear that boundaries needed to be respected. His unwavering support was comforting, but I still felt a mix of emotions: relief that my husband had my back, frustration over the incident, and a lingering unease that I knew would take time to fade. In the days that followed, Greg reached out to both of us, expressing deep remorse for his behavior. He admitted that he had misread the situation and allowed his playful nature to go too far. His apology was sincere, and while it helped mend some of the immediate discomfort, the incident undeniably changed the dynamic between us. It was a reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how quickly a seemingly harmless moment can veer off course. Ultimately, the experience brought my husband and me closer together. We became more attuned to each other's boundaries and more committed to fostering mutual respect in all our relationships. Though Greg remained a part of our lives, the memory of that evening lingered, a subtle yet significant reminder of the importance of boundaries, trust, and open communication. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Revenge Story Times. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.